Good morning, friends. Welcome to the history lecture on static for SIP 2018 program. So, in the last lecture, we covered till Roundtable Conference, we covered till Pune Pact. In this lecture, we will be covering from 1935 Act, though we will have a separate lecture on all the Constitutional Development Acts, but we will have to cover this for you to understand the future course of action. And we will deal in this lecture till the independence of India. So we will cover these 12 most significant years in the Indian national movement, which is how new reforms came and how things. I mean, this is the most interesting part, to be really honest, of the whole history. And we still have 2 to 3 lectures left after this. In that, we will be covering constitutional development, we will be covering Governor General, we'll be covering important personalities, and we will be covering important acts, educational development, etc. So, I will try to wrap up in next 2 lectures, but it can go up to 3 lectures because the idea is to complete the course, at least deal with those areas which are very high priority for the exam. So let's start with 1935 Act. So as you know that the civil disobedience movement was finally curbed by the British, but it knew that it cannot, it has curbed the CDM with force, but it knew that the nationalists and the masters of India are impatient, and if they are not given this lolly, because Britain always followed this policy of carrot and stick. This has always been the policy used by the Britain with respect to India. So it never used to just do stick, because it knew that we are just 3 lakh people in India, and there are 30 crore people in India. So you have to keep section of population satisfied. Only then we can rule India. If we will alienate each and every section, then someday they might rise in revolt, and that day our rule will be over. So therefore, they thought that now that they have completely curved the CDM, it is time to give them some lolly or give them some carrot, so that the moderate nationalists, or at that time there were no moderates, there was right wing. At least the right wing politicians or right wing group within Congress could be satisfied, and once they would be that they can only be satisfied if we do some constitutional reform, because they knew that the right wing in Congress, they are they're not as anti-British as the left wing was, and they knew that if they will give some constitutional reform, it will lead to debate within the Congress. And it was expecting that something which happened in 1907, that was Surat split, something like that kind could happen with this division, because they knew that if there will be constitutional reforms, the left wing would not agree with it, the right wing would be more vulnerable to accept it, and this would divide the Congress, and right wing, when they will come to power, they will lose their anti-British spirit, and the left wing, when isolated, they would be curbed by the British. That was the whole plan of the government. And secondly, government thought that if this constitutional reform would provide for provincial autonomy, then it would create strong regional leaders or regional satraps in Congress, and that will weaken the central leadership of the Congress. So these were the 2 main intentions because of which the government brought the 1935 Constitutional Reform Act. So let us deal with the key provisions of the 1937 Act. So firstly, it changed the central state relations. So till 1935, the state did not have much power. They did not, their power was derived from the Governor General itself. It was not derived from the Queen, and they were completely dependent on the center. But this 1935 Act, first time it had strong provisions of provincial autonomy. Therefore, there were three lists which were prepared, which was union list, state list, and the concurrent list. And in the state list, the state government or the provincial government was given full freedom on making laws. Second thing it did was, it talked of, or it prescribed the federation, and this federation would comprise of provincial or the British provinces and princely state. And in this the state representatives would be nominated by the rulers. So in center there would be a house, right? In that house there would be representatives which will be elected by the provinces, and this would include both the British province and the princely states. While the representatives of the British province, they would be elected from the, or they were elected by the provincial assembly members. While that of princely state, they will be nominated by the rulers. So the idea of Britain was that if they will be, and 40% of the seats were reserved for them, for the princely state. So the idea was that there would be a strong, solid, conservative bloc of representatives of princely state who would block each and every progressive step of the representatives of the Congress party. The idea was that. Now, the third thing which it prescribed was that the federation would only come into existence if more than 50% of the princely states agree. And since they did not agree, the federation never came into practice. Other thing which it said was that the governor in the state would derive his power not from the governor general but from crown itself. Right, so these were the four provisions with respect to center-state relations. Next is provincial government. So this is a very important act. So you have to, because they can ask anything which is part of this provision. They can ask, and they can ask a statement with respect to that. So 1935 Act is the most important act for your prelims exam. So with respect to provincial government, it said that now the governor would only act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and this Council of Ministers would be responsible to the council. So first thing it did was because 1999 Act did not say that. It said that GG would only, or the governor would only act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers in the transport subject. But 1935 Act, it ended the diarchy. So in 1999 Act DRK, which means there were some subjects which were transferred and there were some subjects which were reserved. With respect to reserved subject, it will be British bureaucrats who would be running those ministries. But with respect to transferred minister, it would be Indian ministers who would be running those ministries. So 1935 Act ended this DRK. Now each and every subject would be transferred, which would be that for each and every subject there will be minister assigned, and this governor would act on the basis of aid and advice of that minister. But there was certain powers which are given to governor also. So he was given the veto power. He was given the veto power. He can also summon the legislature. He can administer the tribal areas. He was given responsibility for safeguarding the minority rights, for privilege of civil servants, and also European business interests. So governor was given responsibility in these following areas. Also, he was responsible for giving assent to the bill, and he can also take over the administration of the state whenever he felt like. Next we have is central government. So it ended the DRK in the state government or the provincial government, but it introduced DRK at the central government. Very, very important trivia for your prelims exam. It introduced DRK at the center, which means at the center there will be some subjects which will be transferred and some will be reserved. And on the transferred subject, the Governor General would act only on the basis of aid and advice of the minister or the Indian ministers. But in practice, Council of Ministers was never appointed. And also in case of transferred or in case of reserved subject, the Governor General would only act on his own discretion. And the reserved subjects were the most important subjects. They included foreign affairs, defense and internal security. Next we have is London and Delhi relations. So there would be, under this act, there would be transfer of, or there was to be transfer of financial control from London to Delhi in response to the long-standing demands of our nationalists, because our nationalists demanded that there should be fiscal decentralization, so which happened under the act. Next we have is powers of the council. So Governor General and the governor could veto, they could suspend the proceedings, they could give the assent, or they could withdraw the assent to the bill. Next we have is electorate. So around 30 million people were given right to vote. And this was only 30 million because of property requirements. If you had, there was this requirement that if you have this much property, only then you can vote. So let's deal with what was the response of the leading forces in Indian national movement at that time, because a question could be asked in prelims exam where they could say that Congress agreed with the 35 Act or the Muslim League agreed with the 35 Act. So therefore it is important for you to know that. So when we talk of Congress, it opposed the proposal where it was given that the representatives of the princely states would be nominated, because Congress knew that if they would be allowed to be nominated, then they would try to sabotage all the progressive efforts which the Congress representative will try to do. So therefore the Congress demanded that the representatives of the princely states should also be elected. Muslim League opposed it because Muslim League thought that this would lead to Hindu domination, because ultimately who will reach to the parliament? The people who will reach to the parliament will be elected by the state assemblies, and it knew that in most of the states it is the Congress which is the dominant party. Therefore there would be more members of Congress at the center or at the parliament, and this would mean that there would be Hindu Raj which will be established and the minorities will not be represented. So therefore it also opposed against it also tried to oppose the 1935 Act. With respect to states, the states thought that 1935 Act would end the paramountcy. So what is paramountcy? Paramountcy means that it is when the British came to India, it declared that you all will be rulers, but ultimately you will accept us as the big brother, as your what you call as your God. So the states earlier initially they supported the 35 Act because they thought that this would end the paramountcy of British and they would be liberated. But when the British announced that even after the 35 Act the British would remain the paramount power, the states would have, or the princely states had no incentive to join the federation. Therefore they refused to join the federation. And also the princely states thought that with a democratic government at the center, it would give boost to democratic forces within their princely states, and that would harm their long-term interest. Now let's come to the elections of 1937. So the Britain announced that on the basis of 1935 Act, there would be elections which will be held in 1937. So within the Congress, there were three groups who had three kinds of ideology. There was first group which wanted to take part in election. They were basically the right-wing leaders like Rajgopalachari, Rajendra Prasad, etc. So they thought that if we will take part in elections, we will try to expose the act, we will try to expose how hollow this act is. Thus we will try to, because now that we are not launching any movement, therefore we will keep the nationalist spirit alive with our speeches inside the parliament. Then there was second group which was basically the leftists. They did not wanted to take part in election because they thought that if they will take part in elections, that would mean moving to 1999 era where the Congress believed in following constitutional opposition to the government, where the government believed in constitutional means. So they said that all the progress done in last 15 years would be wasted if we take part or if we accept this constitution, because they knew that there is no real power that we will get, and ultimately we will get no real power, and people will or the masses will think that we are the new lords, and when we will not be able to fulfill their expectations with the limited power we have, we would lose our mass base. That was their main concern. So this group was led by Nehru and Bose. And then there was third group which was led by Gandhiji, which was somewhere in between, and they want to do construction work. So they neither wanted to take part in second thing this leftists wanted, they wanted to relaunch the civil disobedience movement, because they believed, because Nehru's idea was struggle till the victory is achieved, while Gandhi's idea was that struggle through struggle, which means he knew that the power of the masses to bear the to bear the British onslaught is limited. They cannot continue to struggle forever. So his idea was struggle, then truce, which means to to withdraw and re-energize yourself and then struggle again. So his idea was struggle to struggle. So Gandhiji believed that time is not right for launching civil disobedience movement because the masses have already they are in fatigue, and therefore we should focus on construction work. We should focus on constructive work, which means to increase the mass base of the Congress party, work among the untouchables, work among the women's, work among the tribals. So it neither wanted to take part in elections nor it wanted to relaunch the civil disobedience movement. Ultimately, when Gandhiji knew that they are not in the same platform, and to avoid any split which the British wanted, Gandhiji proposed a middle way or the middle ground. So he said that those congressmen who can't do satyagraha, they can't be sitting idle in home because they are very, very powerful and very, very efficient leaders. So for them, he allowed them to take part in the elections, and he even shielded them by the onslaught which was done by the leftists. When the leftists called them less patriots, they said, Gandhiji said that no, they are the patriots. Their message is different. It does not mean that their love for the nation is less than us. To conciliate the left wing, Gandhiji appointed Nehru as the president. So that is how both the groups were, or that is how the middle ground was found, and the split was avoided. So let's now discuss the performance or the impact of the ministries of Congress at the state. So when the Congress ministry was formed, it definitely increased the nationalist spirit among the people because for the first time they realized that someone who looked like them, who wear clothes like them, are ruling over them. So it increased the nationalist spirit, it increased the civil liberties. Secondly, it improved the workers' relation. So, in all the states where the Congress was in power, there were focus given on political arbitration, which means that Industrial Dispute Act was passed in the states, which prohibited strikes for first 4 months. So in the first 4 months, there has to be arbitration opportunities where the owners of the mill should negotiate with the workers, and only after these 4 months, when the arbitration process is failed, only then they can go for strikes or lockout. And that is how the number of strikes during this period reduced drastically. Next we call is Dalits. So in most of the states where the Congress was ruling, temple entry laws were passed. Fourthly, with respect to princely state, it also ignited national movements, or it ignited democratic movements in the princely states, because the people of princely states, when they interacted with states where the Congress were ruling, they came to know that the people in those states, they are enjoying a lot of civil liberties. So they therefore demanded this also in their own princely state. Next is Jamidars. So these are the positive areas where the Congress government worked. Then there was some negatives also. So the first negative was that the Jamindari system was not banned. So this was expected by many of the leaders of the present movement, that Congress, when they will come to power, they will abolish the Zamindari system, but they did not do because of three reasons. Firstly, the multi-class structure of our national movement. So in our national movement, not just workers and the peasants, but even some zamindars, at least the small zamindars, were also supporters of Congress. Therefore, Congress did not wanted to alienate any of the group. Second thing was that in all the states there was this upper houses which was filled by these representatives from the princely states, and they were very conservative, and they would definitely block the bill which will be passed by the lower assembly. So second reason was conservative and reactionary upper house. And thirdly, they knew that any bill with respect to this would have to go through the governor, and he would never give assent to this kind of bill. Therefore, this is not possible for them to do that. However, the Congress ministries did reduce the rents. It tried to abolish illegal levies. All these things it tried to do. Now in 1939, World War II started, and India was made party to the war without the information, or without even telling or seeking the advice of the Congress ministries. Therefore, the Congress ministries thought that we are powerless. We are ruling in India, and here is a government which has declared that India will be party to the war without even seeking our advice. We have been elected democratically. What is the use of this office if we are not even taken for consideration for these so important issues concerning the nation? Therefore, Congress ministries resigned in 1939, and the Muslim League, they tried to they celebrated the day of deliverance to mark that, because they kind of believed that in these 2 years in the Congress ruled states, the condition of Muslims have significantly decreased, and now that with this resignation, the Muslims are finally liberated from this Hindu Baniya Raj. So after the declaration of war, the British chose not to seek advice of Indian nationalist leaders because they thought that it is not necessary. But in 1940, things became to change when Hitler attacked Britain, and Battle of Britain started to take place. In 1940, Britain started to face some reversal, and therefore there was this strong opinion which emerged in England that Indian nationalists should be taken into confidence and their support should be taken for the war. So therefore they sent August offer in 1940. And what were the key components of that offer? So it said that Governor General's Executive Council would be immediately expanded to include more Indians. And second thing, it said that a war advisory council will be set up to help the government in managing the war needs. And the third and most important thing which it said was that after the war, there will be a constitution making body which will be established and subject to the fulfillment of certain conditions like treaties with native states, minority rights protection, defense of India, protection of Indian services. The constitution making process would primarily be responsibility of Indians. So it said that after the war, Constituent Assembly would be established, and the responsibility in this Constituent Assembly or the constitution which this Constituent Assembly would make would primarily be done by the Indians. So you have to remember these keywords: primarily, not solely. There's a difference between that. So what were the reactions of this? So with respect to Congress rejected the offer because it does not promise anything interim. It said that after the war it will be established, and Congress knew that even in World War I the British made so many promises, but after the war it did not implement the promises. So therefore the Congress demanded that Constituent Assembly should not be established after the war, it should be established immediately. And second thing, it criticized it criticized the provisions which said that the British would ensure that full weight to the minority opinion would be given. So it said that it would amount to giving veto power to the Muslim League and the Hindu Mahasabha. Next is after this August offer was rejected by the Congress, there was this problem in the Congress. Congress again went to the situation of split, because after this August offer was rejected, there were 2 to 3 groups in Congress, or there were 3 groups again which were which were created in the Congress. There was first group which was led by Gandhiji and right wing. So with respect to what should government or what should the Congress party do? Should Congress party launch any mass movement, or should it support the Britain in its war effort? So on this question, there were 3 schools of thoughts which emerged in the Congress party. First was Gandhi and the right wing. So they were very anti-fascist, and they knew and they tried to sympathize with the Britain. They knew that Britain is going through hard times, and they knew that Hitler is an evil to the world, and therefore if humanity wants to succeed, we will have to support Britain in this matter, because they are on the right side of the war. They are fighting for right side. They are fighting for right issues. Second group was led by Nehruji and some other leaders, and it became the official viewpoint of the Congress party. He said that both the Britain and both Germany, they both are imperial power. This war is imperial. Neither of them are good. Though we sympathize with Britain, we are anti-fascist, but Britain is also British is also an imperial power. Therefore, if Britain wants that India should support Britain, it should first leave India. It should first liberate India. It should first give independence to India. Only when we will become independent, we will try to support the Britain, because it is on the right side. Without leaving India, after ruling over India, being imperial power, how could we support you? Because you are also not on the right side. And the third group was led by leftists like Bose, and they said that we should immediately launched mass movement, because right now Britain is focusing, or most of the army of Britain is focused in the Europe area. Therefore, this is the right time where we should launch the mass movement, because it believed that British are as evil as the Germans. Therefore, it's pragmatic for us to launch a mass movement now, so that we could increase the problems of the Britain, and Britain would be forced to liberate us, or forced to give us independence. So the second view became the official view of the Congress party, and they technically believe that we will first give opportunities to Britain to negotiate, because Gandhiji is always his view was always like that first I will give all the opportunity to negotiate, and mass movement will be launched only when all possibilities of negotiations are closed, right? So therefore, for a symbolic measure, individual satyagraha was launched in 1941. And this was not a mass movement. It only wanted to send the message to the Britain that we are not happy with you declaring India to be part of war without consulting with the masses of India. And it was also anti-war. I mean, this satyagraha was, what it would do, it would select a single guy, and this single guy will tell the police guy that on this date, on this time, I will be going there and I will be giving an anti-war speech, and I will be giving an anti-British speech, and if you want, you can arrest me. So first satyagraha was launched by Acharya Vinoba Bhave. Second was launched by Jawaharlal Nehru. So they used to go there, and if they were not arrested there, they used to go to another village, and they used to again give the same kind of speech. So naturally, since it was not a mass movement, it did not attracted much enthusiasm, and it did not try to, or did not achieve much. Finally, after this individual satyagraha, the Britain sent the Cripps mission. So let's understand the background on basis of which the Cripps mission was sent. So Sir Stafford Cripps was a member of Labour Party, and he was very sympathetic to the Indian cause. So in 1942, after the August offer, the Britain started, defeating the Germans, or the revulsor was reversed, and therefore Britain again started to ignoring Indian opinion. But in 1942, US also joined the war, and US was very concerned because US was wanted Indian support, or the support of Indian nationalists also in the war, and therefore it pressurized the Britain to include, or to get the support of Indian nationalists in the war. So therefore Britain sent the Sir Stafford Cripps to head the Cripps mission to talk or to negotiate on the future of India. So what were the key provisions? So it had three main key provisions. Firstly, during the time or just now, Governor General, Executive Council would be completely Indianized except the Commander-in-Chief post. So except the Commander-in-Chief post, all the members of the Executive Council of Governor General would be Indians. Second provision of this mission was that an elected constituent assembly comprising solely of Indians, not primarily, solely of Indians, would be established or would be set up after the war to frame the Constitution of India. And this constituent assembly, the members of this constituent assembly would be elected by the members of the provincial assembly. So it does not give the method, it talked about how or it also said that it will be solely by the Indians. And the third thing, or the third provision it said, was that the Britishers or the British government will accept any constitution prepared by the Constituent Assembly subject to the fulfillment of the condition that each province will have right to accept or reject the draft constitution, and if a province does do that, it can enter into separate agreement with the European as its or in its sovereign right. So try to understand the third provision. It said that the Europeans would accept, or the British would accept, any constitution framed by the Indians subject to fulfillment of the condition that each province will have the right or disright to accept the constitution or not to accept the constitution. And if a province does not accept the constitution, it can sign a new agreement with the British as its sovereign, which means that if suppose United Province does not like the province, or United Province does not like the constitution framed by the Constituent Assembly, then United Province can deal with, or it can enter into separate agreement with the British in its sovereign right. So in layman language, it means that the provinces were given freedom to whether accept or to not to accept the constitution. So what was the difference between this and August Offer? So when we compare the difference, in August Offer, it talked about that there will be Constituent Assembly which will be formed after the war, but it did not tell the method, how would be the constituents of the Constituent Assembly would be elected. Neither it said that it will be solely the responsibility of Indian. It said it will be primarily a responsibility of Indian. Secondly, August Offer did not had anything with respect to, or it made no attempt to divide the country, while Cripps Mission had this or it left this option of division of country because it provided that states have a freedom to accept or reject the constitution. Next we have is reactions. So Congress called it as a post-dated check because it said that it did not had anything to give freedom in the immediate run. Congress wanted freedom just now. It did not wanted to wait till the end of the war. It said that Constituent Assembly should be formed just today itself. So it also rejected it because of some other reason, because Congress wanted that even the war department should be for Indians. So even the war department or the war portfolio should also be with the Indians, and the Governor General should not have any veto power. He should act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Second thing which it opposed was that it did not accepted the right which was given to the provinces to accept or reject the constitution, because it thought that this would lead to balkanization of the nation. And thirdly, it said that the representatives of the native states should be elected, they should not be nominated. Muslim League also rejected the offer because there was no element of two constituent assembly in the commission, because Muslim League demanded India and Pakistan, and Cripps Mission only said that there will be one constituent assembly which will be established after the war. Secondly, it said that there were no explicit provisions for the safeguard of minorities. The Hindu Mahasabha also rejected it because it opposed the continuation of separate electorates, and also it was also against the independence given to the provinces to join or not join the federation. Now let's start with Quit India Quit India movement, which is again one of the most significant periods of Indian history. So, what were the factors which were responsible for the launch of Quit India movement? So, as you know that when the Congress ministries resigned, there was demand in major section of Congress that they should launch a mass movement immediately, but it was rejected by Gandhiji because of 3-4 main reasons. Firstly, it said that the war it said that the cause of the war is justified, and therefore the problems of Britain should not be increased at that time. Secondly, they felt that because they were ruling from last 2 years, the Congress party has been filled with lot of people who are there for self-interest. It has lost its mass appeal, it has lost its grassroots connection. Therefore, we need a year or two to reorganize the Congress party to again, so that again it could become a mass-based party. And thirdly, it knew that there is lack of Hindu-Muslim unity at this moment, and if they launch a mass movement now, it could trigger into a communal riot. And also, fourthly, because of the Gandhian philosophy that there should be opportunity given to the enemy for negotiation, and only after negotiation is or it's stopped, only then, or it is exhausted, only then mass movement should be launched. So let's now discuss the factors which led the Congress party to launch this movement. Firstly, there was failure of Cripps mission. So after the failure of Cripps mission, the Congress leaders realized that the Britain is not serious in dealing with India, or it is not serious with dealing with the question of independence of India, and therefore we need to hit the streets again in order to force the British to take some further action. Secondly, European war reversals. So when Japan was annexing territory by territory in the Southeast Asia, the British and the French left the territory and they went back to their homeland, leaving the natives behind the Japanese, behind the operation of Japanese. It opened the eyes of Indian nationalists because they realized that they can do the same with India, because at that time Japan had occupied Malay Peninsula, and the next target would have been Myanmar and India. So Indian nationalists thought that they would do the same in India. If the Japanese would attack, these people would run, and we will have to face the brunt of Japanese rule. Therefore, they thought that only when we will become independent, and they also realized this thing, that because we are the colony of Britain, it is motivating Japan to attack us. Therefore, they thought that if we will become independent, we will be able, or we will be strong enough to fight against the Japanese. Thirdly, there was wartime difficulties. So there were shortages, there were inflation, there were famines, all these. There was Bengal famine, in which many millions perished because the Indian grain or the Indian rice was used for or Indian rice was used to export to Europe, and also because Japan was not allowing India to export it or to import it from Myanmar. So Gandhiji gave the call of do and die in Bombay, and once he launched or before the before the movement was even formally launched, Gandhiji and other top leaders were arrested. So the British learned the message from the last movement when Gandhiji was not allowed, or he was not arrested, because the British thought that if he would be arrested, he would become martyr and that would further give the movement a boost. Therefore, he was not arrested last time. But in this movement, Gandhiji and the other nationalist leaders like Nehru, Patel, they were arrested before this movement was even formally launched. But this further encouraged the leaders or the masses to launch the movement, because they realized that with all their leaders in the jail and there is no one which is giving them any direction, they will have to take the burden in their own shoulders, and therefore their arrest even further motivated the masses to rise up against the British rule. So there were 4 phases of this movement. So the phase 1 was the phase of mass protest. So it started in August 42, ended till October 42. So this was the first Gandhian movement which used violence. A question could be asked in the exam where they could ask that all the Gandhian movement or Quit India movement was completely non-violent. So when they ask the statement, you have to mark it wrong, because there was a good use of violence in this Quit India movement. The people, they kind of burned these railway stations, they destroyed post offices, police station, national flags were hoisted forcibly on many public buildings. Many of the nationalists or the young people, they uprooted the railway tracks, they blew up the bridges, they cut telegraph wires, they burnt many public properties. Many Europeans, when they were seen, they were attacked and some of them were even killed. So the people were destroying each and every thing associated with the Britain, whether it's the institutions, whether it's the people. So after this, the suppression was equally brutal. A lot of nationalist leaders were arrested and they were tortured. So the movement went into second phase, which was the underground phase, because now the British were after the Indians, nationalists. They were not leaving anyone they suspected of playing any role in the or in this movement. So then the phase 2 started, which was known as the phase of underground movement. So in this phase, active phase, there was very brutal suppression, which meant that many of the leaders went underground, and through underground they were organizing, or they were directing, or they were giving overall guidance to the young masses. They were also arranging for men, material and arms. So they were organizing all these activities, and the important leaders of this underground movement was Achyut Patwardhan, Aruna Asif Ali, Usha Mehta. They have asked this question once in UPSC prelims. Sucheta Kriplani, Lohia, JP and Biju Patnaik. So these underground leaders were supported even by the capitalists, and these capitalists gave them car so that they can travel from one area to another. The students of the universities, they acted as workers and couriers. Even the villagers refused to aid the police by providing any information. The train drivers, they delivered bombs. So it was a very, this phase, there was kind of a guerrilla war, because everyone was underground in this period. There was this joke that in this phase, every Indian was underground. So during this phase, Usha Mehta ran an Azad radio from somewhere in India. Also, J.P. Narayan organized the guerrilla war at the Indo-Nepal border. Next we have is the third phase, which is the Gandhiji's fast. So by early 1943, the movement was losing its spirit, because as you know that any mass movement cannot continue for more than 6-7 months. People have to go back to earn. They have to take care of their kids, right? So therefore the movement was losing its depth, and there was this fatigue thing which was almost arriving at this movement. But then Gandhiji, as a shrewd politician, he started a 21-day fast against the violence perpetuated by the Britishers. And on the 7th or the 8th, the Gandhi's condition deteriorated, and the British started preparing for Gandhiji's death. And they were even deciding that we will give 1-day holiday. So this gave a very bad message to the masses, because they thought that he is our he is our leader of our national movement. He is sick, and these people, rather than taking care of him, they are making preparation for his funeral. So this did the trick which Gandhiji expected, because Gandhiji lived, he survived this 21-day fast or day fast. But it made the people again very furious. It increased the anti-British spirits among the people, because they thought that these people wanted to kill our national leader, our nationalist movement leader, and again they went to the streets. So there was this funny saying during this time, because because in this time there was famines in Bengal also. So when the Governor General and when some enlightened officials went to Churchill and said that there have been famines going on in India and so many people have died because of lack of food, so Churchill said that so many people have died because of food, when will Gandhi die? So he said, he was very, very against Gandhi. He believed that he is not a fakir, he is just a politician. And he said that so many people have died, but why hasn't Gandhi died yet? Well, what kind of strong willpower this guy has, that even after fasting for 21 days in this old age, he is still not died. So, but this did the trick. Again, there was the nationalist movement, or this movement this movement was reignited. Next we have is the fourth phase, which is not technically divided by time, but this is actually phase which started in 42 and which continued till 46. And this was the phase of parallel governments. So in this phase, there were a number of parallel governments which were established in different parts of India. It include Balia, where it was started under the leadership of Chitu Pandey, Satara, and Tamluk. So in all these areas, the peasants and the masses completely uprooted the British from the area, and they established their own government. They started levying their taxes. They started organizing their own bureaucracy. So now let's look at the spread of this movement in different parts of India. So let's first start with Bihar. Nothing much important for your prelims exam. Mostly it's important for your mains exam. But I mean, one thing you have to remember, that in all the areas, there was same kind of trend. There was this rumors that the university students would come, and in some places they even came, and on the basis of that, the peasants used to rose up in struggle, and they used to uproot all the symbols of the British authority from different places. So in Patna, many of the symbols of the British imperial authority were burnt. In most of the places, the Jamidars were not killed, but the only target was the Europeans. Next is UP. In UP, as you know, that in Balia, parallel government was established, and most of the work was done by students from BHU. It is these students who mobilized the peasants, and then they rose against the British. In Bengal also, the movement was strongest in Tamluk and in Midnapur. So these things are something which they will not ask, because this is something which is very common. In Maharashtra, there was a parallel government which was established in Satara, and the name of the leader in Satara, this is important because they can ask the name of the leader, was Nana Patil. So Nana Patil was the head of the leader of the government in Satara, while in Balia it is Chitu Pandey. Let's come to South India. So in South India, so UPSC generally asks those areas which have some trivia. If area has participated in the movement, then it is okay. I mean, there's nothing special. Almost all India has participated in the war. But one trivia about this movement was that in South India, the movement was very weak. And this was because Dasgopalacharya and other Dravidian leaders like Periyar, they opposed the movement because they saw it as a North Indian movement. So they opposed this movement in South India, and therefore the participation remained weak. Next we have is communal organizations. So RSS opposed the movement. They became informers of the British government, and they used to give information about any congressman where they can find. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who was from Hindu Mahasabha, he even wrote to the governor that we will be trying our best, or we will try our best to help you curb this movement. Hindu Mahasabha, led by Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, also opposed the movement. Muslim League also opposed the movement because it thought that it's just a Hindu movement. The communists also opposed the movement because at that time Russia was the ally of the Britain, or Soviet Union was the ally of the Britain in the World War II. And since Soviet Union was ally, there was order from the Soviet Union that you should support the Britain at that moment. So this was one ironic movement where the left and the right were together opposing the movement, and that is why the communists in India did not got so much goodwill, because people realized that they are not independent. They got all their messages from Soviet Union or China. So therefore their support of British naturally weakened the communist movement in India, but many of the workers and the peasants, they supported the movement. Same went with RSS. Even though RSS as an organization opposed the movement, but many of its volunteers, they joined the movement and they supported the Congress people. Ambedkar also opposed the movement. He in fact joined the executive council as a law member. So the main people who opposed the movement were RSS, Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, and Ambedkar and communists. They all opposed the movement. Let's now talk of significance of the movement. So, first of all, this movement had the widest social base. Princely states participated. Peasants from lowest to highest strata participated. Some bureaucrats participated. Even the jamidars, they remained neutral or they supported. So, it had the widest social base. Second, many government officials for the first time, they also supported the Quit India movement. So they broke their support broke the backbone of the British, because British were ruling in India on the basis of three institutions: the army, the police, and the civil service. So when they kind of supported the movement, they realized that now it's not very much possible for Britain to stay in India for much longer. The Muslim participation in Quit India movement was less because of call by Muslim League for boycott, but lack of riots made the movement more successful. Also, it upped the stake on the table, and after this movement radicalized the national movement to that level that after this the negotiation could be only on the methodology of transfer of power from Britain to India. Now the talk would only be on that, because that is the only thing now left. After this movement, the British were so much demoralized that they knew that now it's not possible to rule with India anymore. Now only thing they focused was on how peacefully they can transfer the power to India. Now let's deal with the constitutional developments or the plans which was there between 44 to 47. So first was CR formula, or better known as, because now you understand after 42 43 the Muslim League was completely demanding that we want Pakistan which would be Muslim majority areas, and it said that it does not care about independence, only thing it is concerned about is Pakistan. And the Britain was also following this policy of divide and rule. It was trying to pamper Muslim League because it knew if there would be lack of unity among Indians, it would continue to rule for much longer period. So Congress realized that without the unity of Hindus and Muslims, the national movement would remain a divided force, and the pressure on Britain would be limited. Therefore, they were trying to negotiate with the Muslim League, and in this context, Rajagopalachari came up with the formula which was Chakravarti Rajagopala formula. So it said that it gave a proposal of Congress to Muslim League, which was that you support us in demanding complete independence. You join interim government with us, and in response we kind of pledge that after the war a commission would be established which would which would demarcate the Muslim majority areas or districts and there would be plebiscite in these Muslim majority districts where all the people, not just Muslims, would decide that whether they want to live with India or they want a separate Muslim state. So this was the demand of, or this was the proposal of Chakravartin formula. He also said that this will only be implemented in case of full transfer of power from Britain to India. If there would not be full transfer of power, this would be considered as null and void. So this will be only implemented in the case of full transfer of power to India. So this formula was to be considered as a basis for talk of Gandhi and the Jinnah. But Muslim League opposed this formula because it said that only the Muslims in the majority district should go for or should vote for plebiscite, not all the population. And formally, a lot of people in Congress also opposed this formula because they thought that we are trying to appease Muslim League so much. So therefore, there was no consensus which could be built on this formula, and this formula failed to do anything. Next was the Desai-Liaquat Pact. So Bhula Bhai Desai and Liaquat Ali Khan were personal friends, and Liaquat Ali Khan was the second most strongest leader in Muslim League, and Bhula Bhai Desai was a Congress leader who participated in Bardoli Satyagraha and other movements. So when all the top Congress leaders were in jail, Desai had made this secret plan in which he discussed the plan with Liaquat Ali Khan, and Liaquat Ali Khan initially accepted it. So the plan was like this, that the Muslim League would join the interim government, or the Muslim League and Congress would join a coalition government, and in this government, in case of ministers, there will be equal number of Hindus and there will be equal number of Muslims. And in this coalition movements, there will be equal number of League people and there will be equal number of Congress people. It also, and in response, Liaquat Ali Khan gave up the demand of separate state of Pakistan. Right, so it talked, Bhula Bhai Desai said that there will be coalition government which will be formed and there will be equal number of people from League and equal number of people from Congress. It would be a coalition government. While Liaquat Ali Khan in favor said, okay, if this thing can happen, then I would, or our party would withdraw the demand for separate state of Pakistan. So when this pact came out in open, both the Congress and the League disowned this pact and disowned their leaders. So Bhula Bhai Desai was not given ticket in the next elections, while Liaquat Ali Khan, when it came out in public, disowned the pact and said that this pact was never signed, or it was never ever signed in private. So even this act also failed to achieve anything. Next we have is Wavell Plan of 1945. So Lord Wavell, when both these plans became failed, finally, and the talks between Gandhi and Jinnah also failed. So, and by this time the war in Europe was also over. Therefore, the British announced that they would stay with the promises which they made in the August Offer and the Cripps Mission, that a constituent assembly would be formed after the war, and they would not backtrack on their promise. Therefore, on the question of the future of India and how the constituent assembly would be formed, Lord Wavell called a conference in Shimla. So it was attended by both Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha and the Congress. So according to his plan, Viceroy's Executive Council would be converted into interim government. And in that interim government, there would be 50% Hindus, caste Hindus, and 50% Muslims. Also, a constituent assembly will be elected on the basis of proportional representation to draft a constitution. So these were the two main provisions of the Wavell plan. First of all, the Governor General's Executive Council would be converted into interim government, and in this interim government 50% would be Hindus and 50% would be Muslims. And the second thing was that the Constituent Assembly would be formed to draft the constitution for India. But the problem was that the Muslim League insisted that all the Muslim members in the council would be appointed by the Muslim League, because it said that because Muslim League is the sole representative of the Muslims in India, therefore it will have the opportunity, or it should be given the opportunity, to appoint or to nominate all the Muslim ministers in the Executive Council. Congress opposed it, because if it would have accepted it, it would have meant that giving up the secular credentials, because Congress was a secular party, and ironically at that time the president of the Congress party was also Maulana Azad. So naturally the Congress party would never accept a proposal which would go against its secular credentials. Therefore it opposed the Muslim League's demand. Now finally Lord Wavell said that till there is no unity among the Muslim League and the Congress, he could not move further with the constitutional plan, or he could not, or finally the talk was in failure because of lack of accommodation showed by the Muslim League. Now what was the significance of this plan? Firstly, it gave Muslim League a check. It made them, it gave them a veto power, that they by their will they could stop, or they could they could stop any of the constitutional talks or constitutional developments in India. It was given, they realized that they now have a veto, and they used this veto every time when the next round of negotiation took place. And second thing is that it increased the prestige of the Muslim League, because now Muslim League, which was till then a small party, came to be, among the Muslims, it came to be, the Muslim realized that it is now their representatives, because they are given veto to safeguard our interest. Therefore it increased the appeal of the Muslim League among the Muslims. Next is Royal Indian Naval Mutiny. So in Mumbai, or at that time it was Bombay, there was a strike by ratings. What do we call ratings? Are basically a rank in a navy which was below the officer rank. So they are also sailors who are not officers. So these ratings were basically Indians, and they revolted because they demanded better food and accommodation and better working conditions. They appealed that, or they kind of said that they have been discriminated by the European officials, and the European officials are given much more better facilities than then. So it started in Bombay, but later many other ratings in other places in India also supported this rebellion, and they started these ratings started demonstration against the government. They refused to accept the order of their seniors. What was special in this mutiny was that the common people also came out in support of these ratings. They thought that these are nationalists, and therefore there was big support of people in all over India. And what was even more special was that there was complete communal unity during this period, and both Hindus and Muslims supported these ratings, because these ratings consisted of both Hindu members and the Muslim members. So therefore both these ratings were supported by the masses. In case of, or in terms of political parties, only the communists supported this mutiny, and in Congress only Aruna Asif Ali supported the mutiny. Why? Because in 46, this happened in 1946, by this time the leaders of Congress, they realized that we would be getting independence in 1 or 2 years, and any country, whether it's democratic, dictator, authoritative, monarchy, the armed forces should be disciplined. And we need and we will require an armed force even in free India. If we will have this kind of indisciplined force, then that would mean compromising the security and integrity of India. So therefore, the Congress government, or the main leaders of the Congress party, they did not supported these rebels. So finally this strike was broken, or this mutiny came to an end with the intervention of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and it was realized, and Patel gave Patel negotiated with the Britain that these people will not be appointed in the post-independent India. So on this belief, these mutineers were not arrested, they were only dismissed. So after independence, these mutineers were not appointed neither in India nor in Pakistan. But the significance of this mutiny is that it also got support of Royal Air Force in Bombay. It also got support of some sections in the army. So it finally made British believe that we will have to leave India as soon as possible, because now these people who we considered as the strongest pillars of the British imperialism, if the feeling of nationalism have even touched them, then we cannot have faith on anyone in India. Then the numbers or the days of us in India are limited. So next we have is cabinet mission plan. So after this Royal Indian Mutiny, as I have discussed, that British came to realize that now we should leave India as soon as possible. Therefore they sent this cabinet mission plan in India. There was one more factor which led to this cabinet mission plan, was that in 46 there were elections in Britain, and Churchill was defeated and Attlee came to power, and Attlee was from Labour Party and he was very sympathetic to the cause of India. Therefore he wanted to give independence to India as soon as possible. So there were two reasons why it was sent. First, this election, and second, the British realized after the Royal Naval Mutiny that it's not possible for them to rule India anymore. Therefore, they should leave India as soon as possible. But there was one more thing which the British realized, because till 46, British always pampered or appeased the communal forces. Like the Muslim League or the Hindu Mahasabha, all their demands were met. They were given veto during the Wavell Plan. But in 46, the British realized, because the idea till now was that this communal division would increase or would delay the independence of India, and it would help the British to continue to rule India more. But in 46, when they realized that now they cannot rule India anymore, they thought that if there will be two states which will be created, India and Pakistan, both of them would be hostile to each other, then definitely one would drift towards Soviet Union. Because by 46, Cold War had started. So the Britain realized that if there would be two states which would be created, one would go to US and one would go to Soviet Union. And this would mean entry of Soviets in South Asia, which the Britain did not like, because it thought that South India or South Asia its own backyard, right? So it did not wanted this kind of scenario to take place. Therefore, cabinet plan pushed for one state solution, or it ejected the idea of partition of India. So let's deal with the provisions of the Cabinet Mission Plan. So firstly, Viceroy's Executive Council will become the interim government, and all members except the Viceroy and the Commander-in-Chief will be Indians. Second thing was that an attempt was made to strike a balance between the aspirations of the Muslim League and the Congress. Therefore, it talked of a federation. It talked of a federation where there would be center, state and princely state, and it talked of grouping, or what you call as sub-federation. So it said that there would be, the states would be considered together in certain groups. So there would be Group A, which would consist of Hindu majority states. There would be Group B, which would be Muslim majority states like Punjab, Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh. And there would be Group C, which would be Bengal and Assam. And each group would decide the provincial matters itself, and in the after the first elections or the first elections, a province could come out of a group, and after 10 years a province could call for reconsideration of group, or it can call for reconsideration of constitution itself. Right, so it tried to strike a balance between the demands of Muslim League and the Congress. So it persuaded the Congress by rejecting the idea of another Muslim nation, and it tried to convince the Muslim League by having this sub-federation idea of grouping, where the Muslim states would be part of one group and there would be autonomy which would be provided to them, and also after 10 years these groups or the states could consider whether they want reconsideration of group or they want reconsideration of the constitution itself. So it gave a vague idea to the Muslim League that after 10 years the Muslim majority states could reconsider the constitution, and they could form their separate constitution, or they could form a separate country. Next is there will be high degree of provincial autonomy which will be provided. So except foreign affairs, defense and communication, all other subjects would be given to the states, and the residual power will also be with the states. This again was done to appease the Muslim League. And fourthly, the Constituent Assembly which will make the Constitution of India will be elected by the Provincial Assembly and on the basis of proportional representation. So what were the reactions of this plan by the Congress and the Muslim League? So in case of Congress, the Congress accepted the part that there will be one Constituent Assembly which will form the Constitution of India, and it said, or it tried to tell to its members that this grouping is optional, it's not mandatory, and it had faith that in some states like Assam and Northwest Frontier, where the Congress would start, this grouping would not come into existence, or even if they come into existence, these groups will come out of come out of India. So Congress thought that the grouping is optional, and therefore it initially supported the cabinet mission plan. The Muslim League thought that this grouping is mandatory, and therefore it initially accepted. It said that there is no, because they thought that this grouping means that the idea of Pakistan is being considered. And later, both went to the British to explain whether this provision of grouping is optional or mandatory. And when the British ruled in favor of Muslim League, it's mandatory, Congress started opposing the cabinet mission plan. So when it started opposing, it refused to join the interim government. Now Muslim League thought that it is an opportunity which it will be given, because now Congress has refused to join the interim government. Now the British will be forced to go to them, and they solely will become part of the interim government, and therefore they will become the masters of India. But the Europeans made it very clear, or the British made it very clear, that without Congress, the interim government is useless. Therefore, without the joining of Congress, Muslim League or Muslim League members will not be allowed to join the interim government. And this naturally the Muslim League did not like, because they said that the Britishers are now favoring the Congress the more. Therefore, in opposition of this proposal, Muslim League launched what we call as Direct Action Day in 1946. Now, Direct Action Day is considered to be one of the most darkest chapters in the history of India, because there were riots which were done in large part of India. In Calcutta, there were riots. In Calcutta, a lot of Hindus were killed in the riots. The Hindus retaliated in Bihar, where in Noakhali, a lot of Muslims were killed, a lot of Muslim houses were burnt. It led to the situation of civil war in India, because the Muslim League announced that if they will not get it by constitutional means, they will get the idea of Pakistan by force. They gave the slogan of Leke Rahenge Pakistan. by force. So they just literally upheld the Congress party also. And Congress party in September, they joined the interim government. And when the Congress party joined the interim government, the Muslim League thought that if Congress will only be the member of this interim government, they would pass the anti-Muslim League legislation, or they will try to pass laws to suppress the Muslim League leaders. Therefore, Muslim League also hesitantly joined the interim cabinet. And in this interim cabinet, Liaquat Ali Khan was given the finance portfolio, and that made the working of the government very difficult, because Liaquat Ali Khan was opposing, or it was not acting on each and every of the proposals of other ministry, because finance, ultimately every proposal of expenditure goes through the finance ministry. So whenever a proposal of expenditure used to come to the finance ministry, Liaquat Ali Khan used to sit on it, and it has not used to do anything on it. So that made the working of interim government very, very weak. And naturally, both the Congress and the League, they resigned from the interim government, because they thought that it's not possible to work anymore. And the Congress, finally, it came up to the mind of Congress that it's not possible to work with the League people anymore, and Pakistan is the only solution, because if there would be no Pakistan, it would lead to civil war. Therefore, reluctantly, Pakistan also, the Congress also accepted the proposal of Pakistan. Now let's come to the arrival, or let's come to the last phase of India's independence, which was the February Declaration and the arrival of Lord Mountbatten in India. So in 1947 February, Attlee announced that at any cost by June 1948, the British would leave India. So the reason, and this is called as February Declaration. So the reason why he said that was that because at that time the Congress and the Muslim League were not in the way, or they were not listening to each other, they were not negotiating with each other. So Attlee thought that this time thing would force the Congress and the Muslim League to end this deadlock and negotiate with each other and negotiate with the British. Ultimately, Mountbatten was sent to India in February 1947, and he first chatted with all the leaders in India. And his first plan was Plan Balkan. And this Plan Balkan was basically when Mountbatten thought that the Muslim League and the Congress are not coming together in the same table, then he thought that he will launch a plan which would scare both of them. So he launched Plan Balkan, according to which freedom would be given to each and every province of India, and British would give freedom to each and every province. So the British will say the UP is independent, the central province is independent, Bengal is independent, Punjab is independent, Sindh is independent, and after this British will leave. Now these independent province will be given freedom whether to join the Constituent Assembly of India or not. Right, they would be given freedom to join Constituent Assembly of India, or they want to join Constituent Assembly of Pakistan, or they want to remain independent. That will be their own freedom. Now he kind of told this plan, or he discussed this plan with Nehru, and Nehru was very angry with the plan because he thought that if this plan would be implemented, it would lead to balkanization of India, and it would adversely affect the integrity of India. Therefore, he refused to even talk on this plan. And after this plan, Mountbatten came with the last plan of India's independence, which was the Mountbatten Plan. And this Mountbatten Plan was done when the British realized that now there is no solution but to create two nations. Only thing Britain wanted was that to keep both these two nations happy, so that none of them will join the Soviets. So it brought up with it came with the Mountbatten Plan, which is also called as India Independence Act. So it had the following provisions. Firstly, it talked that there will be two dominion states, India and Pakistan, which will be established. Remember, it did not talk that two complete or two Republic of India or Republic of Pakistan was formed. India remained dominion status, or India remained under this till 1950. In 50, when Constitution of India was formed, then finally we became truly independent of what you call as Republic. So it talked of creation of two dominion status states of India and Pakistan. And the the majority provinces that has already accepted the Constituent Assembly had no choice, but the Muslim dominated provinces have the freedom to join the Constituent Assembly and to reject the Constituent Assembly. So it gave the freedom to the states the Muslim majority states to join India's Constituent Assembly or the Pakistan, but it gave no option to the Hindu majority states, because naturally they would definitely go with India. Second thing which it announced was that native states would have complete freedom to decide their own destiny. Right, they will be, the native states, they would be given the complete freedom to decide their own destiny, which means they will have the freedom to whether to join Indian states or not to join Indian states. Native states here means princely states. They would not be forced by any republics to join any of them. Thirdly, there will be separate boundary commission which will be set up which will divide the Bengal and the Punjab into Hindu majority areas which will go to India and Muslim majority area which will go to Pakistan. Now in this case, Ratcliffe was given the opportunity, and Ratcliffe had no idea about India. He never has been to India. He was sitting in his room, he just saw the maps, and that is how he divided India and Pakistan. And that is why we have in Pakistan, in the East Bengal side, there was this news which came that there is a border of India and Bangladesh, which is going from the house or between two houses. So one side of the house is in India and one side of the house is Pakistan. So it's as unscientific as that. It also said that after 15 August, there will be two governor generals in India and Pakistan. And after 15th August, the emperor would not be called as emperor of Britain would not be called as emperor of India. So after it became clear that Pakistan would be created, Congress pressurized Mountbatten that Pakistan should be kept as minimum as possible. So Jinnah demanded that whole Punjab and whole Bengal should be given to us, but Mountbatten accepted the Nehru's view that Bengal and Punjab should be divided on the basis of majority, and areas where it's Hindu majority, it should stay with India, and where it's Muslim majority, it should go with Pakistan. So this naturally ends because if it would have been mains, I would have told you much other interesting stories, but since it's prelims and I only want to tell the things which are important for the exam perspective, therefore this ends this lecture. In the next lecture, we will be discussing constituent development process and Governor Generals of India.